What's going on, everybody? Teach back again with another video, and today giving you another 2023 NFL mock draft 2-round edition. I know last week I said, hey, maybe I'll be able to get my first 3-rounder in. I want to get my head coaching predictions out, and hey, I nailed the Frank Reich, but Dan Quinn's going back to Dallas, so 1 for 1 so far. But nonetheless, because of that, I moved my rest of my recording and output schedule back a day. So another 2-round edition. Today's gonna be the first round. Be sure to come back tomorrow for the second round of this 2023 NFL mock draft. But nonetheless, hopefully you guys are excited because I had a ton of fun putting this mock together. I think I have a lot of really fun fits, and I actually have multiple trades here in the first round, which leads me into a perfect segue. That's my question I want to ask you all, and I want to hear your answers in the comment section. How many trades do you think we get in the first round? We had a couple last year, had a few. And I think we're all kind of anticipating a move to be made for somebody moving up to 1 and Chicago trading down. So we're kind of thinking there's already 1. How many do you think we get all in all? I'd love to hear your predictions. If I had to throw one out, I have 2 in this one. I'll say there's 3. I'll just say early prediction, there's 3. So nonetheless, let's go ahead and jump into it. The first trade I already did off screen just to save a little bit of time, and also mock draft database. Like I said last week, the pick for pick trade isn't always great, but this website's great for everything else. But I have the Colts moving up to 1, and if you're an Indy fan, it's probably going to run you 2 1s, 2 2s, if not more. Let's just say in this situation, it's 2 1s, 2 2s, and a third. Let's just say somewhere in that vicinity. So Indianapolis Colts move up to 1, and I want to have some fun here. Let me start with the Colts fans who are probably upset by the fact that I'm doing this. I'm going to go Will Levis with the number 1 overall pick. I actually saw, the thought kind of started to brew in my mind, then I saw a couple of mocks this week, one from the Draft Network and one from Marcus Mosher, who does work for a variety of places, with Will Levis going 1, and I was like, man, you know what? This kind of screams Chris Ballard, this big-framed, tall, strong-armed quarterback. That's Chris Ballard to a T, and I've said multiple times, this Colts roster is built without its nucleus. It was constructed with Andrew Luck in mind, and then he was gone when he retired, and they have not been able to fill that vacuum, Andrew Luck-sized hole right in the middle of their roster. And Will Levis, more than Bryce Young, kind of fits that frame, and more importantly here, Young can certainly be the pick here. And if you're a Colts fan, and I can hear you, pounding on the keyboard, telling me I'm an idiot, that's fine. I'm gonna have 3 quarterbacks go in the top 5, and you could rearrange their order in any way you think is most, correct, and it won't affect anything else on the board. So that's also part of why I'm having some fun here. But nonetheless, if you're gonna trade 2 1s, 2 2s, and a third, you're not picking the first round next year. Do you want to draft the guy with the highest floor or the highest upside? That's kind of the question here. So in my thinking, I'm like, hey, Will Levis kind of fits that Ballard stereotype. And if you're going to give up, let's say, 5 picks to move up to 1, chasing upside is going to be a necessity because you're going to be light on draft picks the next couple of years. So let's have some fun here, and let's go Will Levis number 1. Again, it's the quarterbacks in the top 5. It's whatever, because you can change these orders around, and it doesn't really change the rest of the board. So if you're a Colts fan, you hate this, just put Bryce Young here and just play with your imagination. But nonetheless, let's go Will Levis. Let's have some fun here. Let's say the Colts move up and chase upside, and that leaves the Houston Texans with, I think, the guy they would take at number 1. I'm going to say that for one other team as well. But nonetheless, and like I said, I think if Houston had the number 1 pick, they'd be taking Bryce Young. I think they'd be okay with maybe not potentially as high of a ceiling, but getting that higher floor, because let's just see what this Nick Caserio rebuild is all about, right? Let's see what moves have already been made with the addition of Bryce Young. Have they worked out? Have they not? And then with Bryce Young, this head coaching hire, and then of course, the coordinators, offensive, defensive, of course, specifically on the offensive side, let's see what the identity of this team is going to be moving forward and where future upgrades are needed. So I think Bryce Young is just kind of the catalyst to say, okay, here we go. Let's get this Caserio rebuild off the ground. And, to me, he's the number 1 player on the board. So as much as I like Will Levis, I still think Bryce Young is QB1 in this class. Then we get to the Arizona Cardinals. I think there's an argument to be made. Sorry, I'm going to say this 2 times, I guess. Maybe if the Cardinals had the number 1 pick, they might be taking Will Anderson. To me, it's Jalen Carter, Will Anderson. They're the best non-quarterbacks in this draft class. You really can't go wrong with either one. So that's an A grade. And then here for Chicago, one last time I'm going to say it. If they were picking number 1, let's say they didn't find a trade partner, didn't get the value they thought the pick was worth, I think they stick and pick, and I think they take Jalen Carter. That's that 3-tech Matty Eberflus has been coveting. To me, the best non-quarterback in the draft class, but separated by a hair against him and Will Anderson. Again, I would grade both these as an A. And if they were the complete opposite, I'd grade them still both as an A. So really no going wrong here. And then we get our second, and this is going to end up being the final trade in the first round, just because we'll wait and see. Once we get past free agency and we have an idea of what team needs are really still lingering, maybe for contenders in specific, I might add a third and fourth trade in here. But let's just go ahead and have our second. I'm going to have the Seattle Seahawks. This is going to take a little bit of time. Moving back to pick number 9, swapping places with the Carolina Panthers. And again, the trade machine here is not always great. It might take even more than this, but for the sake of today's video, Seattle and Carolina are swapping places, and then tomorrow Carolina's only going to have 1 second. Seattle's going to have another pick to use, and I'm really excited about this Seattle draft. So if you're a Seahawks fan, I think you're really going to enjoy this because I think I did some nifty stuff I'm really excited about. Nonetheless, let's say Carolina moves up to number 5, and they draft their future franchise quarterback in C.J. Stroud. I mean, this makes all the sense in the world. I had another mock where they moved up to 1 to get Bryce Young, and if C.J. Stroud falls in their lap, I think if he fell there at 9, they would be sprinting the card in. So here they're having to give up some more value to be able to go get their guy. But when you have 2 quarterbacks go 1 and 2, I think then we're talking about this. I think there's gonna be 4 quarterbacks go in the first round, and half of that pool is gone in the first 2 picks. The demand starts to speak, right? So I could totally see Carolina maybe not having enough or not willing to give up enough assets to move to 1, but 5 is enough to where they're willing to part ways with future picks or other picks in this draft, move up to 5 and get C.J. Stroud, who really impressed me in that college football playoff. Really took away a lot of the criticisms I've had. Now, granted, that's just 1 game, but damn, that 1 game where he's getting outside the pocket, he's creating out of structure. When the play's dead, he's still making stuff happen, including that first touchdown to Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, there's a lot to like after seeing that game on top of what you already know as perhaps the most accurate passer, a 6'4", 6'5" build, NFL body, enough mobility to tuck and run. I mean, C.J. Stroud really, in a lot of people's eyes, I think is starting to make a push to be QB1. This QB class just gets more and more interesting because you have your Levis supporters, you have your Stroud believers, and then Bryce Young is my quarterback 1, so I would fall into that camp. But here we got the Panthers being aggressive, moving up to 5 and getting C.J. Stroud. Then we get the Detroit Lions. I'm gonna still go with Brian Brzee here. This could be Myles Murphy. But I kind of want to just talk about, Brian Brzee, because I've had a fair amount of people responding to, or commenting on these videos and saying, like Brzee just doesn't really strike me as somebody who should be going this high. And they're asking me what he does well. And, hey, totally valid. I get all of that. But let's just start what I think he does do well. 6'5", 300 pounds. The dude is a freak athlete. Number 1 recruit coming out of high school. That alone will make him an interesting NFL prospect and probably a first rounder just because of that type of acumen. Now, sure, the production at Clemson wasn't really there. Never really put any great pass rush moves on display, right? Like you look and it's hard to find any moves, if any, shown. And then you look at his run defense and sure, it wasn't great. But this was also a guy who at Clemson, especially when Brent Venables was the DC, a lot of 3-man fronts, but also a guy who moved everywhere from the edge all the way to the nose. Like, this guy never really learned how to play a position. He just played defensive line, if that makes sense. Also missed time because of injuries. And then the tragic, family, his sister passing away this year. I mean, like, that stuff, some things you can't control. And unfortunately, injuries and then that, family unfortunate occurrence took him away from the field. And who knows, with that much more playing time, maybe he figures it out, right? I think this is a guy, though, just like Myles Murphy, who we'll go ahead and end the suspense here. It's going to be the next pick here for the Vegas Raiders. Thought about quarterback here, but I'm going to go Myles Murphy there at 7. But both these guys, I think, are better pros than they are college players because the athletic ability there, and just because, the defense they played in at Clemson, and the coaching really didn't get it out of them. They didn't become superstars there, and I think that ultimately comes back to the coaching and the scheme. But for Brzee, yeah, I think he needs to add some weight and some play strength. But to me, that's not really a concern because I think just about every draft prospect needs to do that. Most, not all, but I would say most. So for Brzee, if he can go from 6'5", 300 to 6'5", 315, 320, and gain some strength, get a little bit more in his lower body, I think that with his athleticism, makes him a little bit better of a run defender. And then he's going to need some coaching to learn some moves. But, I mean, look at Travon Walker last year, moldable clay, right? Like, that's what coaching staffs want. And Montez Sweat, I think, is another interesting example coming out of Mississippi State. This guy who was like, hey, high-level athlete, pretty good run defender in college, and with some time has been able to garner and gain some pass rush moves. So if you're a Lions fan, you might be looking at Brzee and being like, I don't want to wait. But man, in a couple years where you're talking about Aiden Hutchinson and the steps he made in his rookie year, imagine where he is in 2 years, right? And Lee McNeil, I think as a pass rushing nose tackle, there's a lot of upside there. James Houston was really impressive this year as a later round pick. All of a sudden, in the 2 years' time, Brian Brzee could be facing a lot of one-on-ones and really coming into his own. It could be a force to be reckoned with in his own right. So I know Brzee may not be for everybody, but I still think he's in this top 10 consideration. Maybe this is corner here at 6, but I think it's Carter, Brzee, and then a pretty steep drop-off from IDL, while this cornerback room is pretty deep. So let's go ahead and wait on that position. We're actually, if memory serves, are we going to go corner? Looking at my notes, we're not going to go corner later on in this first round, but we will in the second round. I promise, Detroit fans. Then we get to the Vegas Raiders. You miss out on the top 3 quarterbacks. I don't know if they'd want to take an Anthony Richardson here. Maybe you get Brady for a year and then Anthony Richardson takes over. That'd be a fun storyline, right? But let's just say, hey, let's fix our defense. Inside-out versatility for Myles Murphy. So whether Chandler Jones is coming back or not, we have a way to get Myles Murphy on the field. Just like I said with Brzee, very multiple ball of clay. Awesome frame at 6'5", 275. High-level athlete. He's going to put up some gaudy numbers at Indy. And then now it just takes some coaching. I think Patrick Graham's a great DC coach, but really, we're talking about the defensive line coach there at Vegas, really getting the most work with Murphy. So with some right coaching, this dude has a super high ceiling. Then we get to the Atlanta Falcons. I'm going to go Tyree Wilson here. I've said this a couple times. Really nice compliment opposite of Arnold Ebiketie. One guy who can win with power and length. That's being Tyree Wilson, 6'6", 280, 285 pounds. Then Arnold Ebiketie, the twitchy, explosive, first step, finesse, speed rusher on the other side. So really nice compliment. And plus, the Falcons just got to get better at edge rusher. If you're an Atlanta fan, I'm not saying anything you haven't heard before. So we'll go ahead and move on. And we get to pick number 9. So Seattle garners an extra second-round pick. And I've had a lot of Seahawks fans really split on this one. So let me know where you stand. If you're a Seattle fan, what side of the line do you find yourself on? Do you want them to take a future franchise quarterback or not? Here, I think even if you're not like saying, hey, we need to get that quarterback of the future because Geno's the guy. Realistically, I think Geno's kind of a 1-2 year filler, maybe 3. And by gaining an extra second-round pick, and that's just with this trade system, it could be even more in real life depending on how many other callers there are for 5. Then you get those extra picks and your future franchise quarterback. Even if you don't love who they take, getting the extra picks makes this a win in and of itself, in my opinion. But you do get a guy where if you franchise Geno or you give him a 2-year extension even, you got Anthony Richardson waiting in the wings. And, man, I would love to see what he could look like in an offense with DK Metcalf. And we'll see what about Tyler Lockett. I'm going to go wide receiver tomorrow for Seattle. A little spoiler alert there. But, man, I would just love to see what that all looks like. And obviously a team that, as much as I was impressed with Geno and I did like watching him play this year. Again, I think he's a 1 to 2 year option. So got to find that future franchise guy. You get extra picks and Anthony Richardson. I think that's a big win there for Seattle. Pick number 10. Let's go with Christian Gonzalez. A lot of people have him at CB1. He's definitely in my top 3. I feel like my mind changes every day. But I will say Gonzalez has the ability to play man press, off, but also zone coverage. His fluidity in movement and his hips, that's what I think gives him a little bit of extra nudge. So if Jonathan Gannon is back as the DC and they lose out on James Bradberry, I'd feel pretty confident. I mean, it's tough to say you're going to feel confident about a rookie corner starting, but they lose Bradberry and Gannon's back. I think Gonzalez, no matter what they want to do, is a nice fit there. 6'2", going to run in the 4.3s. If not, low 4.4s at the worst. So high-level athlete, got the frame, and again, great movement skills, and also awesome production this year at Oregon. So a lot of things to like there if you're an Eagles fan. Then we get to the Tennessee Titans. I'm still going to go offensive line, but a different name. I've been saying Peter Skoronski kind of feels like a Mike Vrabel dude, but here I'm just going to go Paris Johnson Jr. Let's just say Taylor Lewan becomes a cap casualty and they need a starter at left tackle because Dennis Daly, I think, for pretty much the worst tackle I watched play this past year. At least the tackle that I got to see the most. Fill-in tackles are a different story, but Dennis Daly was definitely rough, so let's go ahead and find a potential upgrade there if you do move on from Lewan. And then Paris Johnson Jr. is my offensive tackle 6'6", 315. Great footwork and was awesome his first year starting at Ohio State. And I think there's a whole lot more to be scratched off the surface there. So then we get to the Houston Texans. I am going to do something different next mock draft. I'm not going to go offensive tackle for Tennessee, and therefore this guy, spoiler alert, is not going to be on the board. Quentin Johnston goes 12 here to the Houston Texans. And I've talked about this with Will Levis and them. Bryce Young may not have as good of an arm as Will Levis, but dude, for a guy who's 5'11" and we're kind of concerned about his frame, Bryce Young's got a pretty solid arm. So don't sleep on that. Still think there's some deep ball capabilities, but also Bryce Young is really great at creating off structure. His ability to move when a play breaks down, his pocket mobility creates for a lot of fun off script potential between him and Johnston. But furthermore, Johnston's just a great satellite player. Ton of forced missed tackles during his time at TCU. Slippery. I think he runs 4.3s. Maybe, again, just kind of like with Christian Gonzalez, low 4.4s, but he's doing that at 6'4". So if he runs a 4.42 at 6'4", That's unbelievably impressive. So a guy who can win at multiple points in the field, and you pair up your franchise quarterback with a future potential #1 wide receiver. I love the sound of that. Then we get to the New York Jets, and this is where I'm going to have Peter Skoronski come off the board. So I'm just basically flipping destinations for Paris Johnson Jr. and Peter Skoronski. But Skoronski, kind of like Elijah Vera Tucker last year, gives you that guard tackle flexibility. I think that's something that the Jets are going to covet, especially while there's some uncertainty around Mekhi Becton. So no matter what avenue you take, there's some options to potentially have AVT or Skoronski fill in, play guard or tackle, no matter what route they want to take. And I mean, hey, maybe Mekhi Becton really works out, George Fant comes back, or Dwayne Brown's good, or whatever ends up happening there at the tackle positions. And maybe in another year's time, you can move on from that Laken Tomlinson contract because they paid him a lot of money. So again, no matter what position we're talking about and how long down the future, Peter Skoronski is going to see the field. I think he's going to see the field quick, and I think he's going to be a damn good football player, no matter where he ends up and what position he plays, to be honest with you. Then we get to the New England Patriots. I'm going to go with Brian Branch. I think this was in... what bump did I just react to earlier this week? Daniel Jeremiah? I think it might have been Daniel Jeremiah. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, yeah, that just feels like the next great New England defensive type of player and the type of acquisition Bill Belichick would jump all over. Brian Branch is just one of those guys who sees the field at a quicker pace. Now, also, it feels like Belichick does love these Alabama players, and they just hired, Bill O'Brien to come back as the OC. So, different sides of the ball, but it does feel like Belichick and Saban have a good relationship. So maybe that plays a factor here. But Brian Branch, minimum, I think a nice nickel to strong safety option. Depends on what they want to do long term with Kyle Duggar, but also Devin McCourty getting up there in age. So maybe even Brian Branch is a long-term free safety. Maybe Duggar plays that. So there's some questions I still need to see answer once we get through free agency. So a little bit of a TBD here, but nonetheless, this could be an awesome Devin McCourty replacement. It could be an awesome strong safety replacement for Duggar. I know they drafted Marcus Jones last year to play the nickel, but I think you could also work Brian Branch into that type of rotation. He's just this flexible, versatile queen on a chessboard, and I love DBs like that. So Brian Branch, and you put him in a scheme with the archetype of a great defensive mastermind in Bill Belichick. I think there's a lot of fun that you could be had there. And then we get to the Green Bay Packers are leaving the New England Patriots. And I've been saying this forever. I'm gonna stop doing Michael Mayer. And today was the day I made good on that promise. I'm gonna go Lucas Van Ness. Sorry, I forgot they have him as an IDL in here. Or maybe they do have him as edge. There he is. Lucas Van Ness. Really interesting blend of flexibility and power, and a big time riser of late. I had him going in the second round of last week's mock, and I was like, yeah, but even here at 33, this doesn't really feel like where he's gonna go. It feels like he's getting a ton of mid-first round love. And again, when you combine power with flexibility, like he can run through a tackle, but also I'm really interested to see that 3-cone number. Can he work underneath and around? Because if so, man, that is scary. Also a redshirt sophomore, so one of the younger edge rushers in this class. So I think all that is really appealing. And you look at Green Bay, and Preston Smith's never really been a player that I've been in love with, both when he was in Washington and Green Bay. He's just too up and down for me, and they gave him that big extension last year. Maybe that was just moving money ahead and trying to free up some space, but that could become a cap hit that they're looking to move on from in a year or two's time. Plus, you got Rashawn Gary coming back from the injury. I assume he'll be back pretty soon. And I think Rashawn Gary's a stud, so I'm not really worried about it. And Kingsley Enagbare, I think, was pretty good as that third pass rusher. But, hey, you never have too many edge rushers, and I do think this kind of gives you a future out with Preston Smith. But also, Van Ness gives you inside-out versatility. So maybe also it's just passing situations, he'll kick inside. And that way you can have more of those, Enagbare and Gary, or Gary and Preston Smith, however they want to work it out, all those guys out on the field. Then we get to pick 16, the Washington Commanders. I'm going to go with Joey Porter Jr. here. I think this is a really nice fit for this defense. If I could find him, there he is. Especially if it's Jack Del Rio back, assuming that he is. A lot of cover 3 in that. And I think Porter, best suited for a man press, but I do think he can play in that zone. I'm interested to see what his athletic numbers come out at in Indy during the NFL Combine, because it sounds like a lot of people are kind of meh, think he's an okay athlete. I feel like I see it a little bit more on tape, but we'll see. Sometimes the footage can be a little deceiving, but minimum 6'2", and a guy who's gotten better and better year over year at Penn State. Obviously, good genes. His dad playing in the NFL, blah blah blah. That's been beaten out of every draft pundit in the world. So I just think a really nice fit here, nice value here at 16, and it gives you a nice cornerback duo on the perimeter of him and Benjamin St-Juste. 2 6'2" corners. Good luck throwing against that on top of the pass rush Washington already has. Then we get to pick 17, the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm going to stick in the cornerback room here. Devon Witherspoon, you could flip these picks just as easy and then give the Joey Porter Jr. treatment to Pittsburgh. I've done that in the past. So if you're a Steelers fan wanting to see the Porter family return to the Steel City, I think that's totally in the cards. And maybe Devon Witherspoon does make for a better fit in Washington. I think that's all kind of subjective. They run a lot of zone. To me, Devon Witherspoon, a lot of man, more of a man press corner, which, Pittsburgh's been playing a whole lot of cover 3 in their own right and in a zone heavy scheme in and of itself. But I just trust Devon Witherspoon. To me, if I had to play a game tomorrow, like if I had this draft class and I, for some reason, had an NFL team, God forbid, Devon Witherspoon would be the corner I would want to be playing on the field tomorrow at the NFL level. I just trust him that much. And he was awesome this year at Illinois. Now, granted, the schedule he played against, not a whole lot of, NFL talent, juxtaposed to Witherspoon. But when you allow 1 yard in press coverage and I think less than 100 yards in total in the season, if not that, less than 200 yards in total in the season, the dude can hoop. I mean, the dude can play. So, big Devon Witherspoon fan. And Pittsburgh long term, what's this number 1 corner position? It felt like they missed Joe Hayden this year. And even when they had Joe Hayden, he was just kind of doing the job. He was just out there to be, good enough for that cornerback 1 spot. So long term, let's figure that out. Also, Cam Sutton, a free agent this year as well. Next up, the Detroit Lions. And I feel like this is going to get me a lot of heat. I feel like Lions fans hate me in and of itself, but I'm going to go Bijan Robinson here. So for the Lions, we've gone Brian Brzee. So I can see some Detroit fans saying, hey, that's a little bit of a project. I'm not interested in that. And then Bijan, we don't want running back. We got to get defense. I hear you. Everything tomorrow is going to be defense, so just stick around. Be sure to come back tomorrow. And actually, in last week's video, I had a lot of Lions fans. If you guys don't think I listen to your comments, this is proof that I do. I had a lot of Lions fans saying, I hate the McKee pick, which I understand. It's granted. You don't want to wait for a quarterback. I get it. You need help now. And they didn't like the Kincaid pick there at tight end. So maybe we'll flip it around, and maybe you won't like my first round. You'll be more optimistic about my second round. But hey, with Jamal Williams hitting free agency, Bijan Robinson is a better runner than Jamal Williams, and he's a better pass catcher than DeAndre Swift, point blank. So it's an upgrade in the backfield through every avenue possible. And really, I just looked at this and I was like, man, Bijan Robinson in the hands of Ben Johnson, the super creative and outside the box thinking offensive coordinator who was garnering head coaching interest for a reason. Man, I would love to see that come to fruition. So here, this is just kind of me playing offensive playmaker with offensive coordinator, pairing, and how much fun I could have watching that. But it could also be seen as a need. Also, Bijan is going to go somewhere. I think he's a lock for the top 20. Furthermore, I think he goes in the top 16, to be honest with you. I think he's a top half of the first round type of player. I think the NFL is still going to, covet what he could potentially be. He's a full offensive weapon. He's not just a running back. He can play the slot. I've said this 1,000 times. 30 to 40% of his snaps, if you wanted to play him in the slot, I think he could do it. So, it's hard to find where he's going to go. I've been going to Tampa a lot at 19, and today I just decided to go with Detroit at 18. So sorry, Lions fans, if that really bums you out. But anyways, let's talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here at pick 19. I'm going to go Nolan Smith. Had him falling a little bit lower in last week's mock, but I still think, late teens to 20s is a good spot there for Nolan Smith. Had the pec injury that, cut his season short, but a guy who was stopping the run at a high level this past year at Georgia, kind of like Brzee, number 1 overall recruit coming out of high school, awesome athlete. And I just look at Tampa Bay, especially down Shaq Barrett in that playoff game against Dallas. Their pass rush was non-existent. And Joe Tryon-Schwenk, I think, is making steps, and he's a promising young player. Honestly, I think when I do my breakout candidates for next year, I wouldn't be surprised if I have him on that list. But hey, Shaq Barrett, is he going to come back being the same guy? No guarantee. Even if he does, they need a third pass rusher. I've been saying that for like 2 years now. So let's go ahead and give him Nolan Smith. And hey, in a perfect world, Shaq Barrett comes back in 100%. Joe Tryon-Schwenk does take that step forward in year 3. And Nolan Smith, as a rookie, can just kind of sit in the wings, be a DPR, just be a high-level athlete. Maybe they use him on stunts and twists, get him running across guards' faces, all that stuff. Basically, cater a role best suited for his skill set. And then with some time, hopefully take some step forwards as a pass rusher. Because we never really saw that at Georgia, but nonetheless, that high of an athlete, and he does have a good size and frame to work with. There's a lot of potential to tap into there. Then we get to the Seattle Seahawks here at 20. I think I've done this once before, but I'm not entirely sure that I actually have, but maybe it's just floated around in my mind. But Trent Simpson here at 20 would be a really fun pairing. Him and Jordan Brooks, 2 uber athletic linebackers. And, Brooks was kind of a surprising first-round pick for a lot. But if you give him Simpson, I think that makes the job that much easier. And ultimately, what you'll see the theme is throughout this, draft is trying to get some reinforcements at pretty much all 3 levels of the defense, while also, stoking the fire, if you will, on the offensive side of the ball. So having some fun here, and then also playing with fits. Don't want to do the same thing over and over and over. I've been going corner heavy here, but also if you're a Seahawks fan, let me know. Do you want to see a corner in the first round? I feel like a lot of Seattle fans are telling me that that's not a Pete Carroll, John Snyder thing. And I know they've hit on Tariq Woolen in the 4th round. I know they've hit on Richard Sherman in the 5th round. I feel like this draft class, though, with as many 6'1", 6'2" corners and long-armed guys that there are in this class, this is a unique class to where it kind of maybe you break your mold in years past. I mean, look at the Packers last year. they don't normally draft 24-year-olds, but they did with Devonta Wyatt, right? Like sometimes your draft trends, they get broken. So I think this could be the year where Seattle drafts a corner in the first round. But hey, I'll lean on your expertise. I'll go with Trenton Simpson here, which I also think, a really good player for a position of need, and you could argue best player available here. So I'm all for it if the Seahawks went that route. Next up, Los Angeles Chargers. I'm never excited when a guy loses his job, but that said, Joe Lombardi was just not doing it for me as the OC in LA. So going to see a change there, and now let's please add that speed wide receiver. I'd like to see if there's a world they can keep Keenan Allen, but if they do part ways, then this wide receiver need becomes that much larger. But let's just say in a perfect world, there's a restructure, some sort of deal worked out where Keenan Allen can stick around. They lighten that cap hit this year, and then you're talking about Keenan Allen in the slot, Mike Williams on the outside, Zay Flowers also playing on the perimeter. He played inside and out at Boston College, but really I'm talking about his movement skills. I want him as a satellite player, but also as that burner down the field. One of the better route runners in this draft class, in my opinion, especially when you get him working deep down the field, because again, his ability to move in space is one of the best in this class, and that can be applicable to deep route running. And I just want to see Justin Herbert push the ball down the field. So I think that was a two-step process to get that happen. Change at OC, add a speed wide receiver. If they take Zay Flowers in the first round, then I think you go 2 for 2 this offseason. Get to the Baltimore Ravens. Now, I have Jordan Addison as a higher-ranked wide receiver, in my opinion. Like, when it comes to my big board, my wide receiver rankings, Jordan Addison's going to be ahead of JSN. I'm a little bit lower on JSN, than I think a lot of people are. It's just, I get worried about a wide receiver who's going to run 4.5, 4.6 when you're only 6'5", 6'1". But that being said, I decided to switch this because originally I had planned for Addison to be the pick here, but I was thinking about Rashad Bateman in that 2021 draft. Originally kind of sounded like he was going to be 6'3", 210, 215, somewhere in that. And then I know he got COVID his senior year at Minnesota, and he lost some weight there, but also we get to Indy, and he turns out he's about 6'1", and the wingspan's not as insane as we thought it was either. So you kind of lost that big body type. He's a good route runner. I still like Rashad Bateman a ton, but now I just kind of want to add a contested catch guy with good ball skills, good sharp route running, a guy who can win underneath would also be a nice add. And I feel like JSN is a perfect acquisition for that type of a need. And furthermore, you get rid of Greg Roman as the OC. Go back to 2021, sticking in that same year, the Ravens ran the third lowest percentage of 3 wide receiver sets. So I was always kind of worried about the JSN fit because I'm not entirely sure he'll be able to play on the outside. But with a new OC, maybe there's more 3 receiver sets, and therefore there is a bigger role for JSN there in the slot. So let's just say all that plays out, and I think this is obviously a huge need for Baltimore. So let's go get him a wide receiver I just don't think they have right now on the roster with Jackson Smith and Jigba. Next up, the Minnesota Vikings. I'm going to go Cam Smith here. Man, this fitness defense, if it is Ed Donatel sticking around, would be fire. If you're going to play that deep, soft zone coverage, Cam Smith can definitely do that. I also think Cam Smith can go get a dude at the wide receiver or at the line of scrimmage, go get a wide out at the line. Got a little handsy, a few more penalties, actually more penalties this year than he had the 2 years preceding it. But that said, I still trust the talent, and he may not be J.C. Horn, but may not be far off either if all works out. And, you look at Minnesota in that cornerback room, and they need help big time. That stands out as the biggest need on that team. But also off-ball linebacker. Like, I think back to the Giants game in the wild card round. They dump it off to Saquon, and because the Vikings are so old and slow, nobody's getting to him until he's gained 8 yards, right? Like, that's just not a good look for your defense. Eric Kendrick's getting older, and obviously a 1-year deal for Jordan Hicks. So really at all 3 levels of this defense, because long term they're going to need edge, off-ball linebacker, and corner. So yeah, the Vikings, this might be a defensive-heavy offseason, and specific might be their focus in the draft as well. Then we get to the Jacksonville Jaguars here at pick 24, and I've finally been able to make this happen. Been wanting to have this fit come to fruition because, I think back to Doug Peterson's days in Philly and, how much he got out of Zach Ertz and, Michael Mayer. I'm not saying this is my comp for him, but there's some Zach Ertz in there, right? Like, not a high caliber athlete, but a guy who runs routes well, soft hands, can find the soft spots in zone, just does those little things well. And Mayer, good enough blocker as well. So in a perfect world, I'd like to see them bring back Evan Ingram. Obviously on, the right contract, right? Like, don't pay him $16 million a year, obviously. That would be outlandish. But if you get Evan Ingram back on, like, the right contract and Michael Mayer, 2 tight ends with distinct and different skill sets. But then I'm also like, man, Doug Peterson got a lot out of Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert while he was in Philly. So I'd love to see that happen. But also, Evan Ingram's coming off a career year and he's, in his 20s still. So he might be, priced out of Jacksonville's budget. They're a team that's projected over the cap as of right now. So maybe they just don't pay Ingram and instead they go get a cheaper tight end that can have control for either 4 to 5 years if they pick up that 5th year option. So I think that fit makes a ton of sense, and I'd love to see him in a Doug Peterson offense. Next up, the New York Giants here at 26. And this is the reason I was thinking I'd go JSN here because, again, I have Addison ranked ahead of Jackson Smith and Jigba. But that said, I was like, I don't know. You got Wan'Dale Robinson coming back next year to play the slot, so JSN can't play on the outside. You're forcing one of these slot types to play on the outside. There's just no guarantee there. So I am playing with the board a little bit here, and the NFL draft is not going to be so kind, right? So making things fit a little bit better, which, again, not realistic, but for today's video, let's just make it happen. And, maybe Jordan Addison, the other kind of knock here is like, you already have Sterling Shepard, you already had Darius Slayton. Like, didn't you already try this type of wide receiver, these, skinnier, slider build, route runners with some good speed who can work down the field? Yeah, but I also think Jordan Addison's probably the best of the bunch. Also, it's just like a reset at that position. So, Brian Dable didn't really have those guys. He had Sterling Shepard this year, of course, but, only 1 year of that. Now we can have him and Jordan Addison kind of work together for the next 4 years. Ideally, 5+ would be ideal as well. So would love to see this fit. And, I've said this a couple times. I have to be careful saying this because I don't think Jordan Addison is Stephon Diggs, but he could kind of fill that similar-ish role that Dable had in Buffalo. Now, obviously, also Mike Kafka is the OC, so it's not Dable's offense either. But I hope I'm getting the point across all the same. It's obviously a need for the Giants, and to me, he's the second or third best wide receiver in this class. I don't know, Zay Flowers is kind of getting me to change my mind, but still top 3 wide receiver in this class for a team that needs a wide receiver. Good value here at 26. Makes all the sense in the world to me. Then we get to the Dallas Cowboys at pick 26. I'm going to go Emmanuel Forbes, a guy who's really making a first-round push. Daniel Jeremiah, we had that reaction mock-up on the channel already. He had him in the 20s here. And also Dallas needs that number 2 corner like no other. It stands out to me as perhaps their biggest need, which is crazy because that defense is good, but it's like, yeah, I can still get better. And Forbes, this guy who had 14 interceptions, 6 for pick sixes, 17 PBUs at Mississippi State, 3-year starter going back to him as a true freshman, so a younger corner as well, which is certainly appealing. Has the size, right around 6 foot, maybe 6 foot and a half, 190-ish pounds. So checks a lot of boxes to be a first-round corner, and of course the need is there for Dallas. Then we get to the Buffalo Bills at pick 27. Did you watch the Bills game? The Bills-Bengals game, excuse me. As much as that was talked about, the Bengals offensive line and all their injuries, the Bills' offensive line was worse. So, maybe that's the cleats. I'm not buying into that. That's whatever. I just think the Bengals' offensive line played better. And Roger Saffold, unfortunately, was a sign that just did not work out. So let's go get a plug-and-play upgrade there. No Cyrus Torrance, to me, the best guard in this class, unless you classify Skoronski as a guard, which then Cyrus comes a pretty damn good number 2 IOL in this class, specifically at the guard spots, and an upgrade immediately for the Buffalo Bills. Then we get to the Bengals here at 28. And this was originally going to be Anton Harrison. This was really close to being Anton Harrison. But then I saw Jackson Carman, which allowed me to get on a tangent here. Jackson Carman's a guard. I'm sorry. Like, coming out of Clemson, I was like, he looks like a guard. He's a better run blocker than he's a pass blocker. He's great moving forward. This guy's a guard. And, when the Bengals took him in the second round, I was like, all right, could be a potential left guard of the future. Yeah, no, I mean, maybe he's better left tackle. I mean, again, maybe the cleats thing is part of it, but I think that might be, of all the things I would be interested in with the AFC Championship game this weekend, Jackson Carman's one of the players highest on my list. One of the things I'm most interested to find out. Does he do it 2 weeks in a row? Because if so, then, damn, maybe he is a tackle. And then maybe you're moving Jonah Williams inside to play guard where, coming out of Alabama, I thought he was going to be a better guard than tackle anyways, but that's, neither here nor there for today's video. Nonetheless, because Carman held up on his own and the Bengals offensive line, did okay, and if that continues against the Chiefs, maybe that isn't their round 1 focus. So I'm going to be boring and make it another week where I go Darnell Washington, but it does give you that, you got to be careful calling it a 6th offensive lineman because he is a tight end. But that being said, did have pass blocking sets and wins against Gervon Dexter as well as B.J. Ojulari, which that's super impressive for a tight end. It'd be impressive for a tackle, let alone a tight end. So we'll call it a 5th and a half, offensive lineman, but also a boost to the run game, which the Bengals at plenty of times this year have had a hard time running the ball, but also a 6'7", 260-pound tight end who moves pretty well given his size. So hard to bring down. We'll only have to run a limited route tree. Didn't have a expansive route tree at Georgia, but when you're in an offense with Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, really only a couple things I really need you to do as a pass catcher. So if he does those, plus his blocking potential, I think he's totally worth being the pick here at 28. Then we get to the Denver Broncos at 29. I'm going to go Broderick Jones. Excuse me, I said earlier this was almost Anton Harrison for the Bengals. Broderick Jones would be the next tackle off my board. I don't know. Maybe I'll flip Anton Harrison. I'll go back and forth between those two at 3 and OT4, but we'll talk about Harrison in tomorrow's video. But today we're going to talk about Broderick Jones here. And especially for the Broncos, if he could be the right tackle, I think that is better suited for him to be able to get on the field and not be as big of a liability. That 1 year starting at Georgia, and it just feels a little raw as a pass protector. But that being said, has the frame, has the strength. That will get teams excited about drafting him in the first round. But maybe at right tackle, that gives him a little bit of time to be able to refine those skills in pass protection as opposed to being the blind-side protector and having to keep the backside of Russell Wilson clean. At least here, if somebody beats Jones, Wilson has it in his line of sight. So ideally, he's just pretty good as pass protector right away, but I think there's going to be some growing pains there. Therefore, he falls down the board. And that's also, again, we'll talk more about Harrison tomorrow, but I think that's also part of why I think I might end up moving Harrison in my OT3 and Jones down in my OT4, but both worthy of being first-round picks in my opinion. Next up, the Kansas City Chiefs at 30. I've been going edge heavy, and I think that ultimately is the route they go. But because I don't want to be boring and do the same thing over and over and over again. But honorable mentions here to Isaiah Foskey and Andre Carter, who's going to be the pick for the Eagles here in one moment, but we'll come back to that. Those guys, I think, make sense for, hand of the dirt, edge rushers opposite of George Karlaftis. But here I want to go Keely Ringo, right? They've had a couple of young corners playing this year, including Jalen Watson, who, 7th-round pick. And you look at their play, and it's like, man, for a 7th rounder, that's pretty good. But when you take away the fact that they're 7th rounder, have they really been great? I'd venture to say not really. I think maybe the way to phrase this is they can get better there. Those guys were good for 7th rounders, and there's one other corner whose name's escaped me, who was pretty solid for a 4th rounder, but what if we got somebody who was playing pretty good for a 1st rounder, right? So Keely Ringo obviously starting to fall down people's boards a little bit. The lateral movement may not be great. Also, he just has this propensity to give up big plays. Now, I think part of that, honestly, is just how Georgia coaches it, but that's for another tangent for another day. But 6'2", long arms, going to run in the 4.3s. Sounds like a first-round corner in my books. And you look at his skill set as a man-press corner, that's what Spags wants, man. So I think this allows you to play Trent McDuffie in that slot corner role, which I think you think about slot corner, you're like, that's not as necessary, but I go back to Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, which I know he was playing some safety too. And you look at Kyle Hamilton and the impact they've made when on the field, and that, nickel safety hybrid role, that essentially the NFL version of the star backer that Clemson and Alabama have had a ton of success and a ton of players get drafted, including Brian Branch here in this 1st rounder. So I can see Trent McDuffie kind of moving in that role, and Keely Ringo being that perimeter guy. It just feels like a Steve Spagnuolo corner. And again, I didn't want to be boring and do edge rusher over and over and over again. I want to keep my Chiefs fans watching these mocks without knowing what's going to come. Last pick we're going to talk about today is the Philadelphia Eagles, and I've already given it away. I'm going to go with Andre Carter II. Could easily be Isaiah Foskey or someone like that. But I think Carter, I'd like to see him end up in Philly because that rotation is so deep. So even if his rookie year, he doesn't have that immediate impact, he still has some time to kind of grow. And also, man, Philadelphia just is a player production, if you will, factory. I mean, they just know how to refine and polish these edge rushers like no other. And I would love to see Andre Carter 6'7", 260 with that play strength and also that explosiveness off the line. I've called him a locomotive multiple times because it looks like once he comes off the line, he is trying to run through an offensive tackle. And if he wants to, feels like he can. So obviously coming from an academy school, so the leap to the NFL might be a little bit staggering. But nonetheless, I'd love to see him end up in Philly. Feels like it could be a guy who works his way into the rotation and maybe right away as a rookie, but year 2, year 3, I think he can work his way into the mix. And I would just love to see them be the place that he goes because I think they might be the destination that gets the most out of his potential. But that is going to do it for the round 1 version of this updated 2023 NFL mock draft. I'll scroll across the top of the screen just so you can see all these picks one more time, but let me know what you think about your favorite team in the draft pick I gave them or the multiple picks that I gave them. I'd love to hear your feedback. As you heard throughout the video, I do look and respond to a majority of comments. As long as you're not an asshole, I'll respond to you, and I'll also take it into consideration for future videos. So let me know your favorite team. That certainly helps me out a ton. And let me know why or why not you did, or excuse me, why you liked or did not like the pick if you watched this late in the video, appreciate you. But nonetheless, also tell me how many trades you think we get in the first round this year. Love to hear your insight, and love to hear your early prediction as we are at the end of January. So obviously this is just kind of a shot in the dark. But nonetheless, that's going to do it for today's first round portion. Be sure to come back tomorrow for the second round of this updated 2023 mock. But until then, my name is Tej, and I'm signing off.